You're fired. 2 words. That's all it took to shatter my world. I sat across from David Bennett, my boss of 7 years, as he delivered the news with clinical detachment. The global financial company I'd devoted my life to was restructuring, and my position as senior investment director was being eliminated. Your severance package will be generous, David continued, not meeting my eyes. 3 months' salary, plus benefits. HR will email you the details. I didn't cry. Emma Harrison doesn't cry, not even when her carefully constructed life starts crumbling around her. Instead, I stood up, smoothed my pencil skirt, and walked out of that glass-walled office with my head held high. The whispers followed me to my desk. Of course they did. In the cutthroat world of Wall Street, news of someone's downfall spreads faster than stock prices during a market crash. I packed my belongings into a single cardboard box. 7 years of 80-hour weeks, missed family events, and sacrificed relationships reduced to a few personal items and a potted plant. My phone buzzed. Speaking of family. Is it true? My sister Victoria's voice dripped with barely concealed glee. Did you really get fired? I shouldn't have been surprised she already knew. Victoria had always had an uncanny ability to sniff out other people's misfortunes, especially mine. News travels fast, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Oh, Emma, she sighed with mock sympathy. What are you going to do now? You know how Dad feels about failure. Yes, I knew exactly how William Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global Investments, felt about failure. He'd made it clear our entire lives that success was the only acceptable outcome. Second place was just first loser, he'd say. Now his eldest daughter had become exactly that, a loser. I'll figure something out, I said, ending the call before she could respond. But figuring something out proved harder than I expected. The financial crisis had hit the industry hard, and jobs were scarce. My impressive resume suddenly felt worthless as rejection after rejection rolled in. Overqualified, they said. Looking for someone with different experience, they explained. 2 months into my job search, I sat in my father's mahogany-paneled office, swallowing my pride as I asked for help. Absolutely not, he said, not even looking up from his computer. I didn't build Harrison Global by hiring failures. Dad, please. I just need a temporary position until. Until what? He finally looked at me, his steel gray eyes cold. Until you embarrass this family further. Your sister warned me this would happen. Said you were too ambitious, too reckless with your investments. My stomach churned. Of course, Victoria had been poisoning Dad against me. She'd always resented that I'd climbed higher in the financial world than she had, even if it wasn't at the family company. I wasn't reckless. I defended myself. The market changed. Everyone was caught off guard. Everyone except successful people, he corrected. Everyone except your sister, who wisely stayed within Harrison Global where I could protect her. Everyone except your brother James, who's about to make partner at his law firm. The comparison stung, as he knew it would. Victoria, the dutiful daughter who'd stayed at Harrison Global, now held the position of vice president. James, the golden boy, was rising through the ranks at one of New York's most prestigious law firms. And me? I'd struck out on my own, determined to make it without the Harrison name, only to crash and burn spectacularly. The annual family gala is next week, Dad continued. I think it's best if you don't attend. We don't need rumors about your situation overshadowing Victoria's promotion announcement. I stood up, my legs shaking slightly. So that's it? I'm just being erased from the family because I lost my job. You erased yourself when you chose to leave Harrison Global. I'm simply acknowledging the reality of your choices. That evening, I sat in my luxury apartment, the one I could no longer afford, surrounded by unpaid bills and rejection letters. My phone buzzed with messages from so-called friends and family members, each one twisting the knife deeper. Heard about your situation. So sad. Always knew you were taking on too much. Should have listened to your father. The final blow came from my mother. Her text message perfectly crafted to sound concerned while delivering maximum damage. Darling, your father's right about the gala. Take some time to sort yourself out. Perhaps consider a less demanding career. Victoria knows someone looking for an executive assistant. I threw my phone across the room, watching with satisfaction as it hit the wall. Executive assistant. To go from senior investment director to fetching coffee and scheduling meetings. That was their solution? A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw James, looking uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored suit. "What do you want?" I asked, opening the door. "To help," he said, stepping inside. "I talked to some contacts. There's a position opening up at—" Let me guess, I cut him off. "Something entry-level? Something more suitable for someone who's failed?" "Emma, be reasonable. Your reputation in the industry is shot. The Harrison name can only protect you if you accept help on our terms." "Our terms, not my terms. Never my terms. I don't need protection," I said. "I need support. I need my family to stand by me while I figure this out." James ran a hand through his expertly styled hair. "That's not how this family works. You know that. We reward success, not—" He gestured vaguely at my apartment, where moving boxes were already stacked in corners. "This." After he left, I made a decision. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me grovel for scraps of their approval. I'd lost my job, yes, but I hadn't lost my skills, my knowledge, or my determination. I spent the next week liquidating everything I owned. The designer clothes, the art collection, even my prized first edition books. Each sale felt like cutting away a piece of my old life, but also like shedding dead weight. The night of the annual family gala, while the Harrison clan celebrated Victoria's promotion in their mansion on the Upper East Side, I packed a single suitcase with essentials. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Victoria. "Just announced my promotion. Wish you could have been here to see it. Though I suppose it's better this way. Less embarrassing for everyone." Attached was a photo of her with Dad, both beaming at the camera, champagne glasses raised in celebration. In the background, I could see Mom wiping away proud tears, while James stood nearby, already working the room for new clients. I typed out my response carefully. "Congratulations. Enjoy your moment. But remember this night, because I promise you, it won't be the last time you hear my name." Then I blocked their numbers, walked out of my apartment for the last time, and headed for the airport. I had a plan forming, one that would either rebuild my life or destroy it completely. 5 years. That's how long I gave myself to prove them all wrong. I had no idea then that those 5 years would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire Harrison empire. My first stop was London. An old colleague from my investment firm had moved there years ago, starting a small consulting business. Charlotte had always said I had a standing invitation if I ever wanted to leave New York. I doubted she'd expected me to show up with nothing but a suitcase and a desperate need for a fresh start. But she took me in without question. The guest room's yours for as long as you need, she said, helping me settle in. But knowing you, that won't be long. She was right. Within a week, I had transformed her spare room into a makeshift office, walls covered in financial charts and market analyses. Charlotte's consulting business focused on identifying struggling companies with potential for turnaround. It was exactly the kind of work I needed, a chance to prove I could spot value where others saw only failure. There's something happening in the tech sector, I told Charlotte one evening, surrounded by research papers. Small companies with revolutionary ideas, but they can't get traditional funding because they're too risky. Sounds familiar, she smirked, handing me a cup of coffee. I ignored her jab. The big investment firms are too conservative right now, too scared after the crash. But that means there's an opportunity for someone willing to take calculated risks. Someone like you. I looked up at her, a plan crystallizing in my mind. Someone exactly like me. Over the next few months, I worked harder than I ever had at my old firm. During the day, I helped Charlotte with her consulting clients. At night, I built my own database of promising but overlooked tech companies. I lived on coffee and determination, sleeping only when exhaustion forced me to. Then came the breakthrough. A tiny startup in Manchester had developed an algorithm for predictive market analysis. The technology was revolutionary, but traditional investors wouldn't touch it because the founders were too young, too inexperienced. I saw something different. I saw myself in them. Talented people being underestimated by an industry too set in its ways. I want to invest, I told Charlotte. She looked at me like I was crazy. With what money? You sold everything you owned. Not everything. I pulled out the one piece of jewelry I'd kept. A rare blue diamond necklace my grandmother had left me. This should be worth enough to buy a significant stake in their company. Charlotte's eyes widened. Emma, that's your emergency fund, your safety net. No, I said, already researching jewelry assessors in London. It's my future. The necklace sold for £300,000. I invested every penny in the Manchester startup, becoming their primary advisor in the process. Within 6 months, their algorithm had caught the attention of major financial institutions. Within a year, they were acquired by a leading tech company for £15 million. My stake was worth £3 million. But more valuable than the money was the reputation I built. Other struggling tech companies started reaching out, desperate for someone who understood both finance and innovation. I launched Monarch Enterprises, named after the butterfly that emerges transformed from its chrysalis. Charlotte joined as my partner, bringing her consulting expertise and client network. We moved into proper offices in the City of London, hired a team of analysts, and started building something revolutionary, a company that specialized in finding and nurturing overlooked potential. 3 years after being thrown out of my family's world, I sat in my corner office, reviewing our latest acquisition. Monarch Enterprises had grown beyond anything I'd imagined, with offices in London, Singapore, and Dubai. Our portfolio of companies was worth over $200 million, and we were just getting started. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize with a New York area code. Ms. Harrison? A familiar voice said, "This is David Bennett, your former boss at—" I remember. I cut him off coolly. Right. Well, I'm calling because we need your help. The firm is struggling. The market's changed, and we're looking for innovative solutions. Your work with Monarch Enterprises hasn't gone unnoticed. I savored the irony for a moment before responding. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, but Monarch doesn't typically work with companies that lack forward-thinking leadership. Perhaps try an executive recruitment firm instead. I hear they're always looking for good assistants. I hung up, smiling as I remembered his similar dismissal of me years ago. But my satisfaction was short-lived. An email popped up that made my blood run cold. Harrison Global Investimentos facies Hoa style TAKEOEER at TEMT. The article detailed how a consortium of investors was attempting to seize control of my father's company, using a combination of market pressure and leaked information about questionable investment practices. I should have felt vindicated. After all, wasn't this exactly the kind of failure my father had accused me of? But something didn't feel right. I knew Harrison Global's weaknesses. I'd grown up studying them. This attack was too precise, too well-informed. Someone on the inside was helping the takeover attempt. Before I could dig deeper, my assistant burst in. "Ms. Harrison, you need to see this." She handed me a tablet open to a financial news site. The headline made my heart stop. Monarch NTERPRISE is revealed as Majesty Buer of Harrison Global DEP. Somehow, without my knowledge, someone had used Monarch's subsidiaries to purchase millions in Harrison Global bonds. Bonds that could now be used to support the hostile takeover. But I hadn't authorized those purchases, which meant Charlotte. I called out, but my office was empty. My partner, my friend, the woman who'd helped me rebuild my life, was nowhere to be found. On my desk, a single envelope had appeared. Inside was a note in Charlotte's handwriting. "Sorry, Emma. Victoria's offer was too good to refuse. She says to tell you that family always comes first, even when that family needs to be taught a lesson." I leaned back in my chair, pieces falling into place. Victoria hadn't been content with destroying my place in the family. She wanted to destroy everything I'd built afterward, too. But she'd made one crucial mistake. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd never deleted. "Hello, sister," Victoria answered smoothly. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." "Call off the takeover," I said quietly. She laughed. "Or what? You'll run to Daddy?" "Oh wait, you can't. You're not welcome in this family anymore, remember?" "No," I replied, my voice steady. "Or I'll show everyone exactly how those Harrison Global bonds ended up in Monarch's portfolio. I'm sure that SEC would be very interested in the paper trail." Silence. "You're bluffing," she finally said, but I heard the uncertainty in her voice. "Am I? Check your email." I just sent her documents proving every illegal step in her plan. Charlotte might have betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one who knew how to keep records. "What do you want?" Victoria asked, her smoothness replaced by barely controlled panic. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I want what I've always wanted, dear sister, a fair chance to prove myself. And thanks to you, I'm about to get it." "What do you mean?" "Check tomorrow's financial news. I think you'll find it very interesting." I hung up, then pressed the intercom. "Janet, please prepare the conference room. We're having visitors tomorrow. The entire Harrison Global Board of Directors." My assistant paused. "Your family's company? Are you sure?" I looked at the photo still hanging on my wall, the one from Victoria's promotion gala 5 years ago. They'd celebrated my downfall that night, convinced I would fade into obscurity. "Yes," I said, "it's time for a family reunion." To be continued. The morning of the board meeting dawned bright and clear in London. I stood at my office window, watching the city come alive below. In a few hours, my family would walk through those doors, not as the powerful Harrisons they believed themselves to be, but as people desperate for my help. Ms. Harrison, Janet appeared at my door. Your brother James is here. He's early. Of course he was. James had always been the diplomatic one, the fixer. They'd sent him ahead to test the waters. I found him pacing in the conference room, his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. He stopped when he saw me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. 5 years had changed us both. Emma, he said finally, you look successful. Amazing what being thrown out of the family can do for one's career. I sat at the head of the table, my table, in my company. Why are you here so early, James? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. To warn you, Victoria, she's not going to make this easy. She's convinced Dad that this whole situation is your fault. I laughed. Of course she has. Let me guess. I'm orchestrating this hostile takeover as revenge, using poor, innocent Charlotte as my pawn. Something like that. He sat down, looking tired. The thing is, Em, I've been looking at the numbers. Harrison Global is in serious trouble, even without this takeover attempt. Victoria's been making risky moves for years, hiding losses, manipulating reports, and you're just now noticing. I interrupted. The brilliant lawyer, Dad's trusted advisor, and you never thought to check what your sister was doing with the family company. He had the grace to look ashamed. I trusted her. We all did. After you left. I didn't leave. I corrected sharply. I was thrown out. There's a difference. Before he could respond, Janet appeared again. They're here. The Harrison contingent filed in like an army entering enemy territory. First came my father, still imposing at 65, his white hair and tailored suit projecting authority. Behind him, Victoria, her face a mask of cold hostility. My mother followed, then the board members, all longtime family friends who'd watched me grow up and then watched me fall. Well, my father said, looking around the impressive conference room with reluctant appreciation, you've done well for yourself. No thanks to any of you. I stayed seated, making them come to me. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss. Victoria remained standing, her hands planted on the table. We don't have to discuss anything. Call off your takeover attempt, and we'll forget this childish revenge plot. I smiled, pressing a button on my desk. The large screen behind me came to life, displaying financial records, transaction histories, and email correspondence. You mean like how you forgot to report these losses to the board? I asked sweetly. Or how you forgot to mention using company funds for personal investments? Or perhaps how you forgot to disclose your offshore accounts? The color drained from Victoria's face. Behind her, board members began murmuring, peering more closely at the damning evidence. That's confidential information, she sputtered. How did you? Charlotte may have betrayed me. I cut in. But she's not the only one who knows how to keep records. Did you really think I wouldn't have safeguards in place? That I wouldn't investigate why my own company was suddenly buying Harrison Global bonds? My father stood up, his face darkening. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Dad. I'm stating facts. Victoria has been systematically looting Harrison Global for years. The hostile takeover? She orchestrated it herself, planning to buy back control at a fraction of the cost using her hidden accounts. She just needed a scapegoat. Me. The board erupted in chaos. Victoria tried to speak over the noise, but years of evidence was scrolling across the screen, undeniable in its detail. Enough. My father's voice cut through the commotion. He turned to Victoria, his expression thunderous. Is this true? For the first time in her life, Victoria had no smooth response, no clever manipulation. Daddy, I can explain. Mr. Harrison, one of the board members interrupted. If these allegations are true, we need to take immediate action. The SEC will not need to be involved, I said calmly. All eyes turned to me. At least, not if we handle this internally. My father's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I stood up, walking around the table slowly. Monarch Enterprises will purchase a controlling interest in Harrison Global. We'll install new management, restructure the debt, and implement proper oversight. The company will survive. The Harrison name will remain untarnished. And Victoria, I paused, looking at my sister, will resign, effective immediately. You can't do this, Victoria whispered. Actually, I can, and unlike you, I'll do it legally. My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. You take control of my company, after all this time? No, Dad, I'm saving your company. There's a difference. I returned to my seat. You have 1 hour to decide. Otherwise, these documents go to the SEC, and the Harrison legacy becomes a cautionary tale in financial ethics. The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat in my private office while the board debated, watching London traffic flow beneath my window. James came in briefly. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry. For 5 years ago, for not seeing what Victoria was doing, for everything. I nodded but didn't respond. Some wounds take more than words to heal. Finally, my father entered. He looked smaller somehow, less like the titan who dominated my childhood, and more like an old man who just discovered his world wasn't what he thought. The board has approved your proposal, he said stiffly. Victoria has resigned. We'll announce the restructuring tomorrow. I turned to face him. And he met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something new there, respect. And I was wrong. About you. About everything. Yes, I said simply. You were. He moved to leave, then paused. That night, at the gala, when we celebrated Victoria's promotion, you said we'd hear your name again. I did. I didn't believe you then. I couldn't imagine. He gestured around my office, taking in everything I'd built. I couldn't imagine you proving me wrong so spectacularly. After he left, I sat alone in my office, emotions warring inside me. I'd won. I'd proven them all wrong. The prodigal daughter had returned in triumph, just like I'd promised. But victory felt different than I'd imagined. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. My mother stood there, looking uncertain. The caterers want to know about Sunday dinner, she said. I blinked, confused. What? Family dinner. We've missed so many. She twisted her hands together. I thought maybe, if you're not too busy. I looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged these past 5 years. Worry lines etched deeper around her eyes. How much had she known about Victoria's schemes? How much had she worried about the daughter she'd helped cast out? I'll have to check my schedule, I said finally. But maybe. She nodded, understanding this was as much as I could offer right now. Change wouldn't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. 1 month later, I sat in what had once been my father's office at Harrison Global. The view of New York was exactly as I remembered, but everything else had changed. Victoria had fled to the Cayman Islands, where she lived off whatever funds she'd managed to hide. James had returned to his law practice, but now he called regularly, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. My father had stepped down as CEO, taking an advisory role instead. We met weekly to discuss business, our conversations slowly expanding to include more personal matters. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. Monarch Enterprises continued to grow, its reputation only enhanced by the skillful handling of the Harrison Global situation. Charlotte's betrayal had hurt, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about trust and vigilance. My assistant, still Janet, who'd followed me from London, brought in the morning papers. The headlines spoke of Harrison Global's remarkable turnaround, praising the mysterious Emma Harrison's business acumen. But it was the small envelope sitting on top that caught my attention. Inside was an invitation to the annual family gala, being held next month. At the bottom, in my father's handwriting, "This time, you're not just invited, you're the guest of honor." I smiled, remembering that night 5 years ago, when I had walked away with nothing but a suitcase and a promise to prove them wrong. I'd done more than that. I'd proven myself right. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother's number. "About Sunday dinner," I said when she answered. "I'll be there." Sometimes I've learned, success isn't just about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about being strong enough to let them admit they were wrong and wise enough to know when to build bridges instead of burning them. I looked out at the city skyline, thinking about the scared, angry woman who'd left New York 5 years ago. She'd wanted revenge. But what I'd found instead was something far more valuable: redemption, not just for myself, but for my whole family. The Harrison name would continue, but under new leadership and with new values. The empire hadn't fallen. It had been reborn, stronger and wiser than before. And me? I was no longer the daughter who'd failed, the sister who'd been cast out. I was Emma Harrison, CEO of Monarch Enterprises and Harrison Global, the woman who'd lost everything and built something better from the ashes. The prodigal daughter had returned, not to beg for scraps from her family's table, but to rebuild the entire house. And this time, I'd make sure it was built to last. Something wasn't right with these numbers. I stared at my computer screen, rubbing my lower back as my unborn daughter shifted restlessly. The quarterly financial reports from our Singapore office showed a pattern that made no sense, unless someone was deliberately obscuring transactions. I'm Rachel Chin, 34 years old, and until recently, I was the senior financial analyst at Global Dynamics Corporation, a position I'd held for 6 years. My specialty was identifying patterns in complex financial data, finding irregularities that others missed. It's what had earned me rapid promotions and the trust of our CFO, Marcus Thompson. At least, that's what I thought. "Rachel, you look troubled," Sarah whispered, peering over my cubicle wall. My closest friend at work, she'd been keeping an extra eye on me since I entered my 3rd trimester. "Is it the baby?" "No, it's these reports," I murmured, gesturing at my screen. "Look at these transfers. They're structured to appear routine, but the amounts don't match our typical operating patterns." Sarah frowned, her accounting background allowing her to quickly grasp what I was seeing. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 18 months, I replied, pulling up a spreadsheet where I'd been tracking the anomalies. Small discrepancies at first, easily dismissed as rounding errors or currency fluctuations. But they're getting bolder. This quarter alone, there's over $2.7 million that I can't properly trace. Have you told Marcus? I shook my head, one hand absently rubbing my swollen belly. Not yet. I want to be absolutely certain before I raise any alarms. This kind of pattern usually indicates money laundering. Sarah finished quietly. Rachel, be careful. Remember what happened to Jim in compliance when he started asking questions about the Dubai contracts. I remembered. Jim had been let go during a restructuring that somehow only affected his department. His replacement never followed up on his concerns. I'll be fine, I assured her. I'm due to start maternity leave in 3 weeks anyway. I just need to document everything properly first. That evening, I stayed late at the office, methodically copying files and taking screenshots of the suspicious transactions. My background in forensic accounting before joining Global Dynamics had taught me the importance of thorough documentation. Every anomaly was cataloged, every pattern noted, with timestamps and system logs to prove when I'd accessed the information. As I worked, my daughter kicked vigorously, as if sensing my tension. Easy there, little one, I murmured. Mommy just needs to finish this. I was so focused on my task that I barely noticed Marcus walking past my desk, stopping when he saw me still working. Rachel, it's almost 8. You should be home resting. I quickly minimized my screens, smiling up at our CFO. In his mid-50s, Marcus had always projected a fatherly image, but something in his expression tonight made me uneasy. Just wrapping up some quarterly analyses, I said casually. Want everything organized before my leave starts. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on my computer screens. Anything concerning? Nothing urgent, I lied smoothly. Standard variance analysis. Good, he said. Don't stay too late. Your health needs to come first right now. After he left, I quickly finished copying the last set of files to my personal encrypted drive. Something about Marcus's appearance had triggered my instincts. Why was he still here this late? His calendar had shown him in meetings off-site all afternoon. The next morning, I couldn't shake my sense of unease. I arrived early, planning to secure one final set of records, but my computer wouldn't boot up. System maintenance, our egg help desk, told me when I called. Several terminals are affected. Should be resolved by afternoon. But when I tried to log into the financial system from Sarah's computer, my credentials were denied. That's weird, Sarah said, watching me try again. Want me to log in with my ID? I started to answer, but a sharp pain cut through my lower abdomen. Rachel? Sarah's voice seemed to come from far away as another contraction hit. I gasped. The baby has other plans. Everything happened quickly after that. Sarah called an ambulance while our office administrator notified my husband, James. By the time James met me at the hospital, I was already in active labor. 8 hours later, Emma Grace Chen came into the world, 3 weeks early, but perfectly healthy. In the joyful chaos of those first days with Emma, I almost forgot about the financial irregularities I'd discovered. Almost. But during late-night feedings, as I cradled my daughter, my mind kept returning to those numbers, to Marcus's odd behavior, to my mysteriously timed computer issues. I had just finished feeding Emma one morning, 18 days into my maternity leave, when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Rachel, he said, his voice professionally sympathetic. I hope you and the baby are doing well. We are, thank you, I replied, suddenly alert despite my exhaustion. I'm calling because we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding departmental structure. In reviewing our operations, we've determined that your position has become redundant. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I wasn't entirely surprised. I see, I said calmly, years of professional training keeping my voice steady. And this couldn't wait until I returned from maternity leave. The changes are effective immediately, Marcus continued, ignoring my question. Given your years of service, we're offering 8-week severance, contingent upon signing a standard release agreement. HR will email the paperwork shortly. What about my maternity benefits? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Unfortunately, those terminate with your employment, but COBRA information will be included in your packet. After Marcus hung up, I sat in the nursery rocking chair, holding Emma close as I processed what had just happened. They'd waited until I was on leave, vulnerable, exhausted from newborn care, to terminate me. They probably expected me to sign whatever they sent quickly, grateful for any severance while dealing with a new baby. They didn't know I'd spent 15 years learning how financial criminals think, how they hide their tracks, how they silence potential threats. They didn't know that every suspicious transaction, every irregularity I'd found was safely documented and stored away from company servers. Most importantly, they didn't know that 2 days before going into labor, I'd sent a detailed letter to myself via certified mail, documenting my concerns and the exact locations of my evidence. A simple lawyer's trick, establishing a paper trail and timestamp that couldn't be erased. I looked down at Emma, peacefully sleeping in my arms. Your mommy may be sleep-deprived, I whispered, but she's not stupid. Opening my laptop one-handed, I began composing 2 emails. The first to Lisa Martinez, my former colleague at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The second to Robert Chen, my brother and one of the top forensic accounting partners at Deloitte. The next few weeks would be interesting indeed. Sarah called that evening, furious about my termination. The official story is that your role was eliminated in a restructuring, she said, her voice tight with anger. But they've already posted a job opening that looks suspiciously like your position with a different title. Have they? I said mildly, making notes. That's interesting. Rachel, this isn't right. It has to be related to what you found in those reports. Marcus has been acting strange ever since you left, having closed-door meetings with people from the Singapore office, and this morning, they announced a systems upgrade that's limiting access to historical financial records. They're covering their tracks, I said, unsurprised. Have they announced my replacement yet? That's another thing. They're bringing in someone from Singapore, David Wong. He worked with Marcus at his previous company. I remembered seeing Wong's name on several of the suspicious transactions. Perfect, I murmured. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. Right now, I'm going to feed my daughter, I replied. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, I start showing Global Dynamics exactly what happens when you underestimate a new mother who knows where all the bodies are buried. I spent the next few days reviewing my evidence while Emma napped. The pattern was clearer now, that I could see it all together. The Singapore office was being used to launder money from somewhere, likely one of our Chinese manufacturing partners. Small amounts at first, disguised as routine business transactions, but growing bolder as they went undetected. Except I had detected them, and I had proof. The severance agreement arrived by email, along with a letter formally documenting my termination due to organizational restructuring. The terms were insulting, 8 weeks' pay in exchange for waiving all claims against the company, including any rights to report suspected wrongdoing to regulatory authorities. They really should have had better lawyers review that agreement. I was feeding Emma when Robert called. "Little sister," he said, his tone serious despite the affectionate greeting. "I've reviewed everything you sent. This isn't small-time creative accounting. We're looking at systematic money laundering, potentially tens of millions. How long have you known?" "I started noticing patterns about 3 months ago," I replied, adjusting Emma as she fussed. "But I didn't have concrete proof until just before going into labor." "And they fired you as soon as you went on leave. Convenient timing." "Very," I agreed. "What do you think?" "I think," Robert said slowly, "that Global Dynamics is about to learn why it's a bad idea to mess with my sister. Lisa's team at the FBI is very interested in your documentation. They're particularly intrigued by the connections to certain Chinese companies that have been under investigation." "How interested?" "Interested enough that they want to meet as soon as you're up for it. They're willing to come to you, given the baby." I looked down at Emma, now sleeping peacefully. "Tell them I'm available tomorrow afternoon. It's time to show Marcus that maternity leave doesn't mean I've lost my teeth." The next day, as I sat in my living room with 2 FBI financial crimes investigators and my brother, I realized that my termination might have been the best thing that could have happened. Free from corporate constraints, I could finally share everything I'd found. "The real sophistication is in how they layered the transactions," I explained, pointing to a flowchart I'd created. "See how each transfer seems legitimate in isolation. It's only when you map them all together that the pattern emerges." Special Agent Martinez nodded appreciatively. "This is detailed work, Rachel. Most people would have missed these connections. Most people didn't spend 3 years tracking money launderers in Asia." I replied. I recognized the methodology. It's similar to cases I worked on before joining Global Dynamics. "Which they would have known if they'd actually checked your background," Robert added with a smile. "Their mistake," I agreed, shifting Emma in my arms as she stirred. "What happens next?" "We'll need to move carefully," Agent Martinez said. "We've been building a case against several of these Chinese companies for months. Your evidence could be the key to unraveling their entire network. But if Global Dynamics gets wind of the investigation too soon, they'll destroy evidence," I finished. "They're already trying. Sarah told me they're doing a systems upgrade that's limiting access to historical records." "Classic covering of tracks," Robert muttered. "We'll need to move fast." "How would you like to handle this, Rachel?" Agent Martinez asked. "You could be a confidential informant, or we could take a more direct approach." I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to stay in the shadows, to let the FBI handle everything while I focused on my daughter. But another part, the part that had spent years building my career, that had worked through difficult pregnancies and morning sickness to earn my position, wanted justice. Direct approach, I decided. They tried to silence me by firing me when I was most vulnerable. I want them to know exactly who brought them down. Agent Martinez smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. We'll need you to do something that might feel uncomfortable." I raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Sign their severance agreement." "What?" Robert interjected. "That would waive her rights to—" "No," I interrupted, suddenly understanding. "It wouldn't. That clause about reporting to regulatory authorities, it's unenforceable. Dodd-Frank specifically protects whistleblowers regardless of any severance agreements." "Exactly," Agent Martinez confirmed. Sign it. Let them think you're cowed and desperate. Meanwhile, we'll set up surveillance and start following the money trail you've uncovered. I looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully against my chest. How long do you need? Give us 2 weeks to get everything in place. Then we move. I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. 2 weeks is perfect. Just long enough for them to think they've won. Just long enough for Marcus to get comfortable. Just long enough, I thought but didn't say, to remind Global Dynamics that they should have checked exactly what I knew before trying to discard me. That evening, I signed the severance agreement and emailed it back to HR. Then I composed one more email to Marcus himself. Thank you for the opportunity to work at Global Dynamics, I wrote, keeping my tone professional and slightly desperate. I understand that business needs change. I appreciate the severance offer and hope we can maintain a positive professional relationship. Let him think I was backing down quietly. Let him think maternal exhaustion and financial pressure had defanged me. In 2 weeks, he would learn just how wrong he was. 2 weeks passed quickly in the haze of newborn care. Emma settled into a routine, giving me precious hours between feedings to refine my documentation and coordinate with the FBI team. Sarah kept me updated on developments at Global Dynamics, each piece of news confirming that we were on the right track. They're rushing through the system upgrades, she texted one evening. It is working overtime to migrate financial records. Everyone's locked out of the archives until it's complete. Perfect. They were doing exactly what we'd anticipated, creating an electronic trail of their attempts to hide evidence. Each deleted file, each modified record would only strengthen the case against them. David Wong, my replacement, had arrived from Singapore and immediately begun implementing new protocols for financial reporting. According to Sarah, he called an all-hands meeting to announce that historical records were being standardized to match international formats. He keeps emphasizing that any discrepancies we notice are just conversion artifacts, Sarah reported. But Rachel, some of these numbers don't make sense even after conversion. Document everything, I told her, but don't raise any flags. Let them think everyone's accepting their explanations. The FBI surveillance was already yielding results. Agent Martinez called with updates every few days, her excitement growing as they mapped the network of transactions I'd uncovered. The money trail leads to 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands, she told me during one call, all connected to a Chinese manufacturing conglomerate that's been on our radar for years. We've never been able to prove how they were moving funds to legitimate businesses until now. How much are we talking about? I asked, burping Emma after her morning feeding. Initial estimates suggest over $50 million in laundered funds over the past 2 years. But that's just what we can trace through Global Dynamics. There could be more through other companies. I whistled softly. No wonder they were so quick to push me out when I started noticing patterns. About that, Agent Martinez said, her tone shifting. We've been monitoring Marcus Thompson's communications. He's been in regular contact with executives at the Chinese company, discussing something they call Project Phoenix. Does that mean anything to you? I frowned, thinking back. There was a meeting about Project Phoenix just before I went on leave. Marcus said it was a potential joint venture, but the financial projections seemed optimistic. It's not a joint venture, Agent Martinez replied. Based on intercepted emails, it's their plan to acquire Global Dynamics outright, using funds from the same accounts you flagged. The pieces clicked into place. They're not just using Global Dynamics to launder money. They're trying to buy the company with laundered funds. Exactly. And based on the timeline we've uncovered, the deal is supposed to close next month. I thought about the implications. A Chinese company with known ties to money laundering would gain control of a respected American corporation, using illegal funds to do it. The potential for expanded financial crimes would be enormous. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We're ready to act," Agent Martinez said. "But we need one more piece of evidence. Proof that Global Dynamics leadership knowingly participated in the money laundering scheme." I smiled, remembering something I hadn't yet shared. "Check your email in 5 minutes." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and retrieved a file I'd been saving for the right moment. 3 days before going into labor, I'd recorded a meeting with Marcus, standard practice for all our financial reviews. But this meeting had been different. "These transfers from Singapore," I'd said, pointing to specific transactions. "The amounts don't align with our normal business operations." Marcus had waved off my concerns. "It's all been approved at the highest levels, part of our expansion strategy." "But the documentation doesn't support that," I'd pressed. "These look more like—" "Like what, Rachel?" His tone had sharpened. "Like money laundering," I'd said directly. "The patterns match known techniques for disguising the source of funds." Marcus had stared at me for a long moment before responding. "You're very observant, Rachel. Too observant. Some things are better left unnoticed, for everyone's sake." It wasn't just a smoking gun, it was a confession. I attached the recording to an email and sent it to Agent Martinez. Her response came within minutes. "This is exactly what we needed. Be ready tomorrow morning. And Rachel, you might want to watch the financial news." The next day, I was feeding Emma when my phone exploded with notifications. Global Dynamics stock had been suspended from trading pending a major announcement. Sarah called moments later. "The FBI just walked into the office," she said in a rushed whisper. "Dozens of agents. They're seizing computers and files. Marcus is being led out in handcuffs." I switched on CNBC just in time to see the breaking news banner. Global Dynamics CEO and CFO arrested in international money laundering investigation. The reporters were scrambling to piece together the story, but the basic facts were already emerging. A months-long FBI investigation had uncovered a massive money laundering operation involving Global Dynamics and several Chinese companies. Arrests were being made on both sides of the Pacific. My phone rang again. Agent Martinez. "Turn on the news," she said without preamble. "Already watching," I replied. "How's Marcus enjoying his new accessories?" "Not as much as he's going to enjoy what comes next. We're about to announce the role of a corporate whistleblower whose evidence broke the case. Ready to go public?" I looked down at Emma, who gazed back with her father's dark eyes. More than ready. The next hours passed in a blur. My name hit the news cycles by noon. By dinner, every major financial publication had the story. New mother uncovered $1 million money laundering scheme during maternity leave. The details captivated everyone. The pregnant analyst who spotted financial irregularities. The company that tried to silence her by firing her during maternity leave. The evidence she'd gathered before giving birth. Forums lit up with discussions about corporate ethics and women in finance. James came home early, bringing champagne he insisted I deserved, even if I was still nursing. "To my brilliant wife," he toasted, "who brought down an international crime ring while caring for our newborn." But the real satisfaction came the next morning when Robert called with an update from his contacts at Global Dynamics. "The board called an emergency meeting," he reported. "They're in full panic mode. The stock is going to tank when trading resumes. Marcus and the CEO are looking at serious prison time. And guess what they found in Marcus's emails? Tell me. Explicit discussions about firing you because you were getting too close to their scheme. He specifically mentioned timing it during your maternity leave when you'd be too overwhelmed to fight back. I laughed. How'd that work out for him? Not great, especially since those emails make it a clear case of wrongful termination and pregnancy discrimination on top of everything else. The board wants to settle. They're offering full reinstatement, back pay, accelerated stock options, and a promotion to VP of Financial Compliance. Not interested, I said immediately. I have other plans. Those plans had begun taking shape during my late-night feedings with Emma. The FBI cases had reminded me how much I'd enjoyed forensic accounting, tracking down financial criminals, bringing justice to sophisticated fraud schemes. Actually, I said to Robert, I've been thinking about starting my own firm, specializing in forensic accounting and fraud detection. Think Deloitte might be interested in a partnership. Are you kidding? After this case? Every major firm in the country will be calling you. He was right. By the end of the week, I had meetings scheduled with 3 of the Big 4 accounting firms, all interested in establishing forensic accounting partnerships. The SEC had reached out about consulting on complex fraud investigations, and 2 universities wanted me to guest lecture on financial crimes detection. But the most satisfying call came from Lisa at the FBI. The U.S. Attorney's Office wants to talk to you, she said, about testifying against Marcus and the others. When? Next month. They're particularly interested in how you identified the money laundering patterns. And Rachel? They're very aware that you did most of this work while preparing for maternity leave. I smiled, watching Emma sleep in her bassinet beside my desk. Tell them I'm happy to help. I'll just need breaks for feeding the baby. Of course, Lisa laughed. We wouldn't want your daughter to miss watching her mother take down an international crime ring. The headlines continued for weeks. Global Dynamics stock plummeted when trading resumed. The Chinese company's executives were arrested in Hong Kong. David Wong was caught trying to flee to Malaysia with a hard drive full of incriminating documents. Marcus and the CEO were looking at decades in federal prison for money laundering, securities fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence I'd gathered, combined with the FBI's broader investigation, had created an airtight case. Sarah called one evening, still processing everything that had happened. The office is chaos, she reported. Internal auditors everywhere, external investigators combing through every transaction. And you know what's crazy? They found even more suspicious patterns once they started really looking. This thing is bigger than anyone realized. House morale? I asked, genuinely curious about my former colleagues. Mixed. Some people are scared about their jobs. Others are angry they were deceived. But mostly, people keep talking about you. How you figured it all out while you were pregnant. How you gathered evidence even when you were about to give birth. You're like a legend now. I laughed. Hardly. I just did my job. While creating new life, Sarah insisted. It's inspiring, Rachel. You showed everyone that becoming a mother doesn't make you less capable. If anything, it made you more formidable. Looking down at Emma, peacefully nursing as I reviewed case documents for the prosecution, I had to agree. Motherhood hadn't weakened me. It had made me fiercer, more determined to fight for what was right. 3 months after my terminated maternity leave, I sat in my new office, Emma asleep in a bassinet beside me. The wall held my framed FBI commendation and news articles about the case. My desk displayed a photo of Emma, wearing a onesie Sarah had given her. My mom fights financial crime. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. Marcus took a plea deal. 15 years minimum. Sending you the press release before it goes public. I smiled, remembering his dismissive tone during that termination call. He thought firing me during maternity leave would silence me, that a new mother would be too overwhelmed to fight back. He'd never considered that becoming a mother would make me fight harder. My new consulting firm was thriving, with a growing list of clients seeking fraud detection expertise. I'd hired Sarah away from Global Dynamics to be my operations director, and we were building a team of analysts who shared our passion for uncovering financial crimes. Best of all, I set my own schedule, allowing me to balance complex investigations with Emma's needs. The bassinet in my office raised some eyebrows at first, but my results spoke for themselves. If anything, having Emma nearby sharpened my focus. Every financial criminal we caught made the business world a little safer for her future. 1 year to the day after my termination, I received an email from Global Dynamics' new CEO. They were still rebuilding their reputation, struggling to restore trust with investors and clients. Would I consider consulting on their new compliance procedures? I drafted a simple reply. My consulting rate is $5,000 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 100 hours. Additional fees apply for any work conducted during traditional maternity leave hours. Emma, now crawling and babbling, pulled herself up on my desk as I hit send. I lifted her into my lap, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Never let anyone tell you that motherhood makes you weak, I whispered. It makes you unstoppable. The next generation of financial criminals would learn that lesson the hard way. They'd learn that underestimating a mother's strength, determination, and capacity for justice was a very expensive mistake. And if they didn't? Well, Emma would be old enough for show and tell soon. Maybe she'd like to visit Mommy's office and watch another corporate criminal learn that vital lesson. After all, the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's teaching our daughters that they never have to choose between motherhood and justice. They can deliver both, sometimes even during maternity leave.